Chapter 1. Death. The bluish hue of skin gone cold and limbs forever stilled. The absence of life from the veins which used to be a channel for the soul. A soul that was forever departed. Where the soul went, she was not sure. It was a mystery beyond comprehension, and it terrified her. Although it was commonly known that most things frightened Rita. She may not know where souls went to after they departed the mortal realm, but she did know that hers was a timid one. Her own reflection was enough to make her mind spin in a confused whirlwind of emotions. Death scared her right now as she stared blankly into the unblinking eyes of the man who laid still and empty on the cold cobblestones at her feet. He was dead. Why? Why did he have to die? Why did so many people have to die? She had asked these questions so many times, they now automatically circled in the back of her mind, like a record that spun round and round meaninglessly in its broken sense of purpose. Then, as if on cue, the last question ran through her psyche, sending tingling needles of fear down her arms and spine. Why was she still alive? Her mind found relief from the questions that haunted her as it escaped to the part of her brain reserved for memories, specifically the memories from that afternoon. The still water of the lake reflected the clear blue sky and soft white clouds, painting a beautiful contrast to the dark emerald green of the surrounding pine trees. It was the definition of peace. Rita had drunk it in hungrily like a newborn baby who had just received their first taste of milk. Peace was something very rare in the lower regions where Rita lived. Most folks lived in the dark shadow fear cast upon the land. There was a fear of dying, but it was pale in comparison to the fear of life itself. Every day, a steady march to an unknown end that would snuff out any unidentified shred of hope that may have been fostered deep down in the sacred parts of their souls. This place had a way of making hope a more formidable foe than despair itself, because hope was nothing more than a lie designed to make the pain of the fall several times more intense than it would have been had their spirits never been lifted in the first place. And yet, Rita had felt peace that afternoon. It was not so much the presence of a feeling, but rather the absence of many. A spreading bloom of warmth in the center of her stomach, clearing her insides of pain and chaos by silencing the ever-playing collage of questions that plagued her mind. Silence. Its true melody is only known to those who have never heard it before. And yet, Rita had experienced it before. She could not say when, but buried away deep inside of the part of her heart that held memories long since forgotten was a small ache, a gentle tug on her mind to join the truce that had been erased by the cool wave of time that had crushed her life, a silent plea for help, a petition against the constant state of neglect that had left it in that corner of her heart to perish in shadows beyond her sight or knowledge. It was not that she did not care, it was that she could not. A barrier blocked away that part of her, rendering it beyond her reach. Most of the time it was a wall that completely shut her out. Then other times, like that sunny afternoon, it was a shadow, teasing her with the tantalizing shapes of things inside her soul, probing her to stare a bit harder into the darkness, as if maybe someday she could shed some light on the secrets buried deep inside her heart. Those moments of shadow had been more frequent since he had arrived. Elikai himself was a mystery to her. He was serious and somewhat stern, and yet gentle. There was something about his manner that was familiar to her, but she could not place what it was. Perhaps it was the clear blue of his piercing eyes that seemed to read her every thought and understand her every movement. Or maybe it was the gentle color of his honey-brown hair that fell to his shoulders in gentle waves and lightly bobbed up and down with the sound of his gentle yet confident voice. He was somewhat of a comedy to her, something new in her otherwise lonely and miserable life. His visits quickly became highlights during the few months she had spent getting to know him. She had memorized every expression he made, every tone of his voice, and every word of the stories he told her. Those stories would forever be etched in her mind, she was sure. They were stories of a beautiful girl who grew up in a little cottage in a field of flowers in the highlands, a princess with a crown of purple daisies and white roses, betrothed to a prince who loved her more than his own life. Rita felt a range of emotions in his stories that she had never known possible. Happiness, excitement, contentment, and belonging. Beauty became a reality to her, her constant companion in a world steeped in figurative storm clouds. She began to look past the dark clouds of her mind and appreciate the little moments of beauty outside of herself. This is the mindset she found herself in that lovely afternoon by the pond. She dared to glance down at her reflection in the surface of the water and was startled to find she did not mind it at all. Her face was almost beautiful, framed by the fringed edges of trees that ghosted the corners of the water with their presence. Her dark black hair contrasted the slightly too pale complexion of her thin face, making her look small and sickly. Her blue eyes were much too large for the sallow cheeks and lips drawn tight from years of stress and worry, just as she had always remembered them being. And yet, there was something different about her face, something pleasing, almost attractive. Her eyes no longer appeared empty or pained. There was something relaxed about them. Were those slight smile lines at the corners? She stepped back from the edge of the pond and glanced up to the sky. She had been here in this blissful world of silence the pond provided her for a long time, and the approaching shadows promised a quick descent into nightfall. She did not mind the dark, but knew the middle-aged woman she was housed with would soon start to worry about her if she did not return soon. Reluctantly, turning her back to the place that had provided her with a place of refuge from the confusing whirlwind of existence, she walked slowly up the path out of the forest. That was when it happened. Her whole world of peace and safety that she had finally found, far above the tumultuous waves of the unknown, was shattered by a scream that carried such force the pine trees seemingly jolted in their roots. "Rita! Beth!" Rita called out in response to the voice screaming her name. "I am over here!" Her face appeared in between the boughs of a pine tree. Her ample figure heaved with every breath she took, and the beautiful coil of blazing red hair she had always braided meticulously around her head was frayed, contrasting her dark eyes that shone with fear and urgency. Rita knew something was wrong and braced herself. "Rita, darling, it is terrible." She shook her head and put a hand to her chest. What happened?" Beth looked into Rita's eyes briefly before quickly looking away. "He is a liar, Rita. A dirty criminal. He is finally receiving the justice he deserves." "Who is a criminal?" Rita held her breath and waited. "That scoundrel with soft voice and blue eyes. He is a spy, Rita. A dirty heathen who came into our home and tried to deceive you." "Elikai?" Rita felt her eyes go wide. "No, Beth. No. Elikai is good. What are you talking about?" "Good?" Beth snorted. "Hardly. The man is a wolf in the garb of a sheep. Evil, wicked. No!" Rita snapped. "He is my friend. My best friend, Beth. No!" Rita burst into tears. "Oh, my dear child." Beth hugged the distraught young woman. "He deceived me, too." Rita stopped crying when a disturbing thought hit her. She pulled away and held the older woman at arm's length. "Where is he? Where is Elikai?" she asked. "Rita." Beth looked at her sternly for a moment. "Where?" It was more of a statement than a question. "He is gone, dear," Beth sighed. "They took him to the town square and let the mob have him." That was when the falling sensation began. It stayed with her as she pushed Beth away and ran through the thick forest. It didn't leave as she reached the edges of civilization that became more intense with the sight of It didn't leave as she reached the edges of civilization, and it became more intense with the sight of buildings and people sauntering away from the center of town as the shadows of approaching night deepened in the sky. Then she was there. The large square in the middle of town, left clear for meetings and important town events. She ran until the cobblestones turned from gray to a deep, vibrant red, the color of fresh blood. He was surrounded by it. It gathered in pools around his head and limbs as the once vibrant light of his blue eyes began to fade. "Rita." His voice was nothing more than a faint whisper. "Hold on, Elikai." A tear slid down Rita's cheek as she knelt beside him in the stones. "I am so sorry. I will help you. Just please hold on." "Rita." Even as his soul prepared to leave his body, he found the strength to be stern. "No, you cannot help me." "He is coming soon, though, Rita. He is coming, and he will—" The words were drowned out by a gurgling sound, and Elikai's head slid limply to the side. A trail of blood trickled down the side of his face, and his sharp blue eyes became the glossy shade of wet glass. And that was when she broke. Shaky legs pulled her to her feet, and the feeling of warmth and freedom she had felt inside her vanished. The wall slammed into place, blocking the ghosts of happy memories from her reach, and leaving cold, stony grief in their place. No, it was not a wall inside of her which plagued her now. She herself had become the wall. She wiped the tears from her eyes and stared blankly ahead. The square was deserted except for her and the corpse that lay stiffening at her feet. She didn't move and hardly blinked. Reality hurt too much, and she refused to feel anything. She would stop caring, not because she wanted to, but because she needed to. She looked down at Molochai's limp body and nudged it with the toe of her boot. "Liar," she whispered down at him. "I should be happy to rid myself of you." The sky burst into a brilliant sunset, painting the sky in pink-orange and a dark shade of indigo. Rita didn't notice its beauty. Beauty was no longer her companion, but a foreign invader best ignored. How could you be such a fool as to allow herself to hope things would actually get better? She choked back a sob and turned slowly away from the body in the square and walked away, her silhouette dark against the backdrop of a creatively darkening horizon. A sky that now hung thick and red as blood.